Something that Goldstone report described very well, concluding practically, you know Goldstone mission, you heard about it. It's the commission that was formed by United Nations Human Rights Council, and it was headed by Mr. Goldstone, Judge Goldstone, who is a highly respected person, who happens to be a Jewish person. And his report indicated that Israel has committed at least 7 horrible war crimes during this period of attacks on Gaza. The outcome of these attacks was the death of 1,400 Palestinians, including 412 children, and more than 110 women. The rest, of course, were also mostly civilians, because, you know, men can also be civilians. In the media, sometimes you get surprised because they describe civilians only as women and children. And 80% practically of those who were killed were civilians. The number of injured was even more shocking. We're talking about 5,300 people were injured, including 1,855 children. The ratio is, if you take the ratio of the number of people killed or injured in Gaza and apply it to the population of the United States, for instance, you will be shocked about the result. Had this incident happened in the United States, over a period of 3 weeks, you would be talking about the death of 250,000 people and the injury of almost 1 million people altogether. Remember, please, that on the 11th of September, the incidents that shocked the world, the horrible incidents of attacks in New York, took the lives of 4,000 people. Had this happened in the States, you would be talking about 250,000. Now, during the course of the war, 1,400 Palestinians were killed and 14 Israelis were killed. Of the 14 Israelis killed, 10 were soldiers. 7 of them were killed by Israeli fire, not by Palestinians. And 4 Israeli civilians were killed. The ratio is very clear here. I'm not happy for the death of any person, whether Israeli or Palestinian. I don't want anybody to be killed. But it is really horrifying when you hear a situation as if the Israelis were victims in this conflict, while the ratio was 100 to 1, practically. The second war crime was the destruction of infrastructure for no reason. 25,000 houses were demolished completely or partially. Whole neighborhoods were erased, like Abd Rabbu neighborhood that you can see in this image. Totally destroyed. Completely. And even factories. There was 356 factories left in Gaza that were completely destroyed while the Israeli army was withdrawing from Gaza, after practically all military operations. There is no explanation of that except an act of revenge or an act that was aiming at destroying the last functioning economic facility in Gaza Strip. A third war crime was the use of illegal weapons, specifically things like the white phosphorus. White phosphorus is a very dangerous weapon. In this case, Israel sprayed big areas with white phosphorus. White phosphorus can cause terrible burns. It can also kill the people if it is inhaled, because it destroys the lungs. Or it can kill people if it goes to the bloodstream, because it goes to the kidneys and the liver and causes total failure that leads to death. That's how many people died. And right from the beginning, I want to tell you, nothing from what I said is about negating the security of Israelis or the Jewish people, or negating their suffering during the history, or negating what they have suffered from during the Holocaust and during the pogroms of Russia or the Spanish Inquisition. We know they have suffered a lot. But in this case, first of all, Palestinians were not responsible for that suffering. And second of all, those who are oppressing the Palestinians today are not the same people who suffered. And in my opinion, this kind of behavior that this Israeli government is doing and this Israeli establishment is doing is also against the interest of Israelis. At the end of the day, there is nothing to be proud about in becoming the worst form of apartheid in the 21st century. And this will not finish or change or stop without serious struggle against it. And that's why I believe, in what I call the 4 pillars of Palestinian struggle. First is popular, massive, nonviolent resistance to this action, because it cannot be allowed to continue. And second, strong international solidarity movement that takes serious actions to change the balance of forces on the ground. Unfortunately, so far, the international community has failed to do its duties. And I believe we've reached a moment where nothing will be changed unless people really accept their responsibility, including joining a BDS campaign, a boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign against this improper regime of actions. It is really, for instance, unacceptable that a bank called Dexia Bank invests its money in Israeli illegal settlements. It is totally unacceptable that while Israel conducts these war crimes that were so well reported in Goldstone report, that many governments continue to have military cooperation with Israel. Israel has become the 4th largest military exporter in the world, surpassing Britain. Israel now exports not only military equipment and technology, it also exports security systems. And the Palestinian territories are used as experimental field for these security systems. We are encouraged by the fact that more and more people know about the situation. We are encouraged by the fact that so many people are taking responsibility in their hand. One example of that, for instance, is the most recent decision of all British trade unions, 53 of them, who recently decided to completely boycott Israeli products, and especially products of Israeli settlements. The same applies to Presbyterian churches in the United States, who decided to divest in Israel. President Obama started very well, with a much different and better position than any previous American president. We joked today saying that, of course, he was better than Bush, but it doesn't take much to be better than Bush, you know. But he was the first American president in office who speaks about Palestinians with human face. That was different. It never happened before that an American president, or to my knowledge, any other Western president, would compare the Palestinian struggle of that of African Americans or that of the people of South Africa against apartheid. So that was encouraging. Unfortunately, it seems that he went way ahead of his own establishment. And what we have seen since then is that his own establishment, as well as the Congress, pulling him back, including, of course, the Israeli lobby, which has done everything it could to force him to retreat from his own positions. And what we've seen in Europe is nothing but a system of observation. Everybody is waiting for the Prophet Obama to solve the problem. None of them have realized or wants to realize that if they really want to help him, they have to act. To help him at least against the counterproductive forces that are forcing him to move in the opposite direction. We had a lot of high expectations that were not justified.